And will you pray with me? May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts and minds be acceptable in your sight, O God, our rock and Redeemer. Amen. It was on the eve of Christmas in 1914, 111 years ago tonight. The Great War, as it was called at the time, had been going on for about 5 months. Those months had been long, torturous, and brutal. Over 1 million people had already died. Using a new military defense tactic, the German forces began to build trenches, ditches deep enough to stand in. Soldiers could remain protected from machine guns and artillery fire. And along the perimeter of the trenches were coils of barbed wire, used to prevent an incursion by the enemy. British and French forces soon followed suit and built their own trenches. And eventually, this trench system ran from the North Sea to Switzerland. In some places, there was about 100 yards that separated the trenches. In other places, it was only a few yards. And this in-between place was called no man's land because it wasn't controlled by either army. And if a raid was ordered, one side would have to crawl out of their trench, cross no man's land, and then attempt to invade the trench of the other side. Most often, these raids were not effective. Many people died in the process, and their bodies were left strewn about no man's land because it was too dangerous to retrieve them. Soldiers could remain stuck in their trenches for months. And although they were built to be protective, their conditions were atrocious. Soldiers would stand in feet of standing water and mud. Latrines were few and far between. Rats, lice, and disease were rampant. And by November, the war had settled into a stalemate. Young men had originally enlisted to be soldiers because they had been sold on the idea that this war was going to be an adventure. Many believed that the war would be over in a month. But as the cold weather set in and conditions in the trenches worsened, soldiers learned that this war was not the dream that they had been sold, but a nightmare that they were not going to wake up from anytime soon. In December, governments and businesses sent gifts to those serving on the front lines. German soldiers received sausages and chocolates and cigars, along with hundreds of their beloved Tannenbaum, Christmas trees. British soldiers received brass tins with the image of Princess Mary, and these tins contained cigarettes and chocolates and plum pudding. It was cold and quiet along the trenches when Christmas Eve finally arrived. A dusting of snow blanketed the decrepit earth, and no one knows exactly where it started, but many say it was near Ypres, Belgium. As night fell, German soldiers began to put up their Tannenbaum along the tops of the trenches. They even put candles on the branches and lit them. Allied soldiers watched cautiously, but no one fired a shot. And soon Christmas carols began to float out of the German trenches. And at first, some English soldiers responded by singing bawdy songs, even ditties that made fun of Germans. But the Germans kept singing carols. And eventually, the English began to respond with carols of their own. A particular moment, remembered by those on both sides, is when the voices of German soldiers filled the quiet night with their singing of Stille Nacht, Heilige Nacht. And the English soon followed by singing the English version of Silent Night, Holy Night. And in many places, the singing continued on for much of the night. Soon, shouts of, "We no shoot, you no shoot," followed. Now, no official truce was set for that night. In fact, military leadership on both sides instructed their soldiers to keep fighting. However, many of the soldiers on the front line simply would not. And as the light of Christmas morning dawned, soldiers from both sides began to retrieve the bodies of their fallen comrades in no man's land, some who had been lying there for weeks. And the soldiers began to dig ditches, some alongside those of the opposing side. Crosses made from the British tins were used as grave markers. In one instance, a burial was held for over 100 soldiers from both sides. The service was co-led by an English chaplain and a German soldier who had been preparing to enter into the ministry, but then he was drafted. They read Psalm 23, alternating verses between English and German. And after the burials, soldiers began talking and sharing stories. Germans rolled over barrels of beer. English shared their plum puddings. They traded souvenirs, newspapers, buttons, badges. There were even a few impromptu games of football, soccer, that popped up in no man's land. Not everyone participated in the truce. Those in command seemed the most reticent and skeptical. Some did come forward to shake hands eventually, and later they admitted that they marveled at what they witnessed. Some of the soldiers were too overcome with grief to participate. And some took advantage of the truce to move supplies forward and to fortify their trenches. Sadly, as we know, that was not the end of the war. The war ultimately did continue, and it dragged on for 4 more deadly, torturous years, killing more than 9 million soldiers and 6 million civilians. This very church was built and dedicated in memory of those soldiers who are a part of the Harvard community who fought and died in that war. And after the truce, it took months for the intensity of attacks to resume. In many places, the frontline troops who participated, because of their experience, were such reluctant combatants that they had to be deployed elsewhere. The Great War, what we now call the First World War, was a war driven by geopolitical strategy and the ambitions of kings and rulers. It was the first time the world had seen killing on this scale. Yet it was in this circumstance that another side of humanity presented itself. The story of that one, can we call it holy night? Sounds like a dream, doesn't it? Did it actually happen? Could it have happened? Yes, it did. It happened on Christmas. And at what a better time? In 1914. Perhaps this story seems like a dream because it has since been swept away by the other overwhelming realities of that war. Or if you've never heard this story before, it may be because it is hard to hold on to a dream. The official accounts of the war have tended to downplay it, leaving it to playwrights and songwriters and other dreamers to tell this impossibly wondrous tale. There is one ballad that tells the story of the Christmas Eve truce called Christmas in the Trenches. The writer of this ballad, John McCutcheon, tells of performing this song at a folk club in Denmark in the 1980s. He was performing there each night for a week or so, and every night some old men would stand at the back of the club with some other people, and they would all leave after he sang Christmas in the Trenches. It happened every night. And so one night on a break, McCutcheon asked the old men why they came every night and then left after he sang that song. They said, "We were there in the trenches, and we want to hear the story. It's good to not forget what happened." And McCutcheon then asked them, "And so who are those people that you bring with you? Different people every night." They told him, "Those are the people who have heard us tell about what happened, and we're not sure they've ever believed us." It's hard to hold on to a dream. It's hard to believe it. It's even harder to believe in it. Enchantment belongs in stories. We can handle it in stories. But when it actually happens, when the dream comes to us, it's hard to hold on to. Then again, this is Christmas, and I remember that in the Christmas story, God is so often speaking to the people through dreams. And one of those dreams is a dream of peace.